The Arizona desert lay silent beneath the dying sun, a vast ocean of gold and crimson, where wind whispered through jagged rocks and shadows stretched long like claws. In that wild loneliness moved a girl, young, breathless, and desperate, clutching a weathered leather satchel to her chest. Clara Weston had been running for hours. Her boots were scuffed, her skirts torn by thorn and stone, but she didn't stop. Every beat of her heart drummed one truth: don't look back. Behind her lay her father's ranch, and the open safe she'd left behind. She had stolen from him, not out of greed but survival. Her father, Samuel Weston, was a man carved from cruelty, the kind who built his wealth on others' pain. The gold she carried wasn't his by right. It was the wages he'd cheated from ranch hands and traders for years. When he'd raised his whip against her for refusing to marry a man twice her age, Clara's resolve had broken. That night, while the ranch slept, she filled a satchel with gold coins and fled into the desert. But she hadn't expected the land to feel so alive, or so menacing. The canyon walls seemed to breathe around her, painted in blood-red light, their silence thick with ancient power. She moved cautiously through the narrow pass, glancing over her shoulder, her chest heaving. Every sound, the rustle of sand, the cry of a hawk, made her fingers tighten around the revolver at her belt. By nightfall, she reached the edge of the Apache lands. She knew the stories whispered by ranchers, tales of warriors who appeared like ghosts and vanished without a trace. Her father had called them savages, but Clara had read enough to know they were people, proud, fierce and wronged by men like him. Still, she prayed she wouldn't meet one tonight. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke, a camp nearby perhaps. Her stomach tightened. She ducked beneath a rock outcrop, her breath shallow. She needed to rest just for a moment. Setting the satchel down, she leaned her head against the stone wall, watching the stars begin to spill across the sky. Almost free, she whispered. The words trembled in the air, fragile as hope. Then she heard it, the soft crack of a twig behind her. Her eyes snapped open. Every instinct screamed run, but her body froze. Slowly, she reached for her pistol, rising to her feet. The desert had gone utterly still. The air felt charged, alive, as though something unseen watched her from the dark. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. "Show yourself." No answer. Only the sigh of the wind. She took a cautious step backward and collided with something solid. A hand shot out, swift as lightning, gripping her wrist. The gun fell from her grasp, clattering against the stone. In the moonlight, she saw him. An Apache warrior stood behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair bound in a leather cord, his eyes dark as obsidian. His face was calm, but his presence filled the canyon like thunder. He held her wrist with an iron grip, yet there was no cruelty in it, only command. "You've wandered far from your land," he said, his voice low and even, carrying a faint accent but perfect English. Clara's throat went dry. "Let me go," she hissed, trying to twist free. His gaze dropped briefly to the satchel lying at her feet. The gold coins had spilled slightly, catching the moonlight like fire. "You carry stolen things," he said quietly. "Not yours?" Her heart pounded. "It's none of your concern." A faint smile ghosted across his lips, not of amusement but recognition. "All things in my canyon are my concern." Before she could answer, he bent to pick up her pistol, weighing it in his hand as if it were a child's toy. His movements were measured, unhurried, the movements of a man who knew control. "Who are you?" she demanded, breath trembling. He met her eyes, and the stillness between them thickened. "Talon," he said simply. "And you, woman, you are trespassing." Her defiance flared again, but before she could retort, he stepped closer, his shadow falling over hers. The scent of smoke and cedar clung to him. "I should turn you back to your people," he murmured, his tone deep, steady. "But something tells me you are not running to them. You are running from them." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. He was right, and somehow he knew it. Then, softer, dangerously close, he whispered, "You're in my land now. That makes you mine to decide." And with that, her fate shifted, like the desert wind that carried her name into the dark. The moon had climbed high, pale and watchful, as the canyon fell into silence once more. Clara stood rooted in place, her pulse thundering against the warrior's grip. The Apache's hand was firm but not cruel, his gaze unblinking, a hunter's gaze, patient and sure. For the first time in her life, Clara Weston didn't know whether to fight or flee. Talon released her wrist but did not step back. The silver light traced the sharp lines of his face. High cheekbones, straight nose, a scar across his temple that looked old but deliberate, like a mark of pride. He studied her as if weighing not only who she was but why she had come. "Why do you run, white woman?" he asked, his tone quiet but heavy with command. Clara swallowed hard. "That's none of your concern." Talon's lips pressed into a line. "Then you lie." Her chest rose sharply. "You don't know anything about me." He crouched before her, picking up the satchel she'd dropped. When he loosened the flap and the gold coins glimmered in the moonlight, his eyes narrowed, not with greed but with something colder. "You carry your guilt in plain sight," he said, then tossed the satchel at her feet. "You steal from your people, yet you walk through ours as though we owe you shelter." "I didn't steal for gold," she snapped. "I stole to live." The words burst out of her before she could stop them. The canyon echoed faintly with her voice. For a heartbeat she thought he might strike her, but instead his expression shifted. Something flickered there. Curiosity, maybe even respect. "You are brave," he said finally, standing tall again. "Or foolish." "Both, maybe," she muttered. A faint smile touched his lips. It was gone as quickly as it came, but Clara saw it. A flash of warmth beneath the hard, stoic mask. He studied her a moment longer, then turned his gaze toward the east. "You will not make it across the desert alive," he said. "Your people do not come this far. The knights here take what they please." "I've made it this far," Clara said stubbornly. Talon looked back at her, the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. "Only because I allowed it." The words sank in slowly. She stared at him, uncertain whether he was boasting or warning her. But something in his voice, calm, assured, ancient, made her believe him. He turned and began walking away, silent as smoke. Clara hesitated. She could run. She should run. But her legs wouldn't move. "Where are you going?" she demanded. He glanced over his shoulder. "To my horse." "You will follow." "I will not." He didn't even pause. "You will." "Or you will die here." There was no menace in his tone, only fact, the kind of truth the desert itself might whisper. And Clara, despite every instinct screaming otherwise, picked up the satchel and followed him. They moved through the canyon shadows, the night alive with distant cries and coyotes, owls, the wind sighing through stone. His pace was steady, unhurried, but never uncertain. Clara found herself watching the way he moved, the silent grace, the way his shoulders shifted like a panther's. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing where a black horse stood tethered to a mesquite tree. The animal was large and sleek, its eyes reflecting moonlight. Talon stroked its neck gently before turning to her. "Mount," he said. She stiffened. "You can't just order me around." "I can," he said evenly, "because I will not leave you for the vultures. You may hate me for that later, but you will thank me now." Her defiance flared. "I didn't ask for saving." He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "No, but you need it." For a moment neither spoke. The air between them trembled. Tension, curiosity, something unspoken. Then with a frustrated sigh, Clara climbed onto the horse. Talon mounted behind her, his presence powerful and close. The warmth of his chest brushed her back, and she stiffened instinctively. His breath touched her ear as he murmured, "Do not fear me, Clara Weston." She turned sharply. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer at once. Then quietly, "I have heard your father's name before. The man who trades land for blood." Her breath hitched. You know him?" "I know what he has done," Talon said. "And now I know what his daughter runs from." The horse began to move, hooves striking rhythm against the desert floor. Clara wanted to demand more, but his silence told her he had already said enough. Above them, the stars burned fierce and bright, endless witnesses to a fate neither could escape. And as they vanished into the deep folds of the canyon, Clara realized she hadn't just been caught. She'd been chosen. The desert dawn was cold, the kind of cold that bit through cloth and bone. Clara Weston shivered against the wind, her fingers aching as she clutched the rough edge of the saddle. They had ridden all night, silent, relentless, until the horizon burned gold and the shadows gave way to light. Talon hadn't spoken a word since they left the canyon. He rode behind her, steady and watchful, his arm occasionally brushing hers when the horse shifted. She could feel his presence like heat, silent, controlled, impossible to ignore. By morning, the world stretched out before them, endless sand, thorn brush, and red cliffs carved by centuries of wind. Clara didn't know where they were headed, only that they were deep inside Apache territory. When the sun climbed higher, he finally slowed the horse and guided it toward a dry riverbed. Clara exhaled sharply, her throat parched. "Why are we stopping?" she asked. He dismounted, then looked up at her. "Because you are swaying like a leaf," he said simply. "I'm fine. You are not." Before she could protest, he reached up, his strong hand circling her waist, and lifted her down as though she weighed nothing. The moment his hands touched her, Clara's breath caught. He didn't linger, but something in the quiet steadiness of his touch made her heart beat faster. He handed her a water skin. She drank greedily, the cool liquid spilling down her chin. When she looked up, his eyes were fixed on her, dark, unreadable, but softened somehow. "You ride hard for a woman who's never been hunted," he said. Clara bristled. "You think I've never run before?" Talon tilted his head, studying her face. "You run with fear, not with strength. You think distance is freedom, but running from pain is another kind of chain." His words stung. "You don't know me." "I know the look in your eyes," he said quietly. "The same look my mother had when soldiers took her from our land." For a moment, Clara forgot to breathe. There was no anger in his voice, only memory, deep and sharp as the canyon walls. She looked away. "I didn't come here to steal from your people," she said softly. "I only wanted to escape mine." He nodded once. "I believe you." The word startled her more than any accusation. "Then let me go." Talon stepped closer. "And send you back into the desert?" "You would not last a day. The land eats the unprepared." "Then teach me," she said fiercely. "I don't need your pity. I can survive." A faint smile ghosted his lips. "You have spirit. That may yet save you." He turned and gathered his things, then motioned toward her satchel. "What you carry, it's gold. It will bring danger. Men will follow. Perhaps even your father." Clara's jaw tightened. "Let them. I'm not going back." Talon studied her for a long moment. Then with a low voice he said something in Apache, words that flowed like wind and smoke. She frowned. "What did you say?" "It means," he said, stepping closer, "you walk a dangerous path now, woman of fire." She opened her mouth to argue, but he moved too quickly. In a single motion, he reached out and caught her wrists, binding them gently with a length of soft rawhide. She gasped, anger flaring. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you alive," he said evenly. "You will not wander." "You will not be lost to the desert. I'm not your prisoner," she cried, struggling. "No," he said, voice low. "You are my responsibility." Their eyes locked, and her fury meeting his unyielding calm. She expected to see cruelty there, but there was none. Only determination, and something else. "You don't have the right," she whispered. He leaned close, his breath brushing her cheek. "Out here the land decides who belongs," he murmured. "And it has already chosen you." She froze. Her pulse hammered in her throat, but she couldn't look away. His words felt heavier than threat, like prophecy. Then almost softly he said, "You're mine now." The words sank deep, cutting through fear and pride alike. Clara didn't know what shocked her more, his claim, or the part of her that didn't want to deny it. The wind shifted again, carrying dust and the faint echo of distant thunder. Somewhere beyond the horizon, storm clouds gathered, the kind that could drown the desert in minutes. Talon stepped back, checking the sky. "We ride north," he said, mounting his horse again. "Before the storm reaches us." Clara hesitated, staring at her bound wrists. "And if I refuse?" His gaze flicked toward her, steady and unreadable. "Then I will carry you." For the first time, Clara didn't argue. She climbed onto the horse, her heart heavy with confusion. As they rode into the rising wind, she glanced back at the fading trail behind them. The life she had stolen, the man she had left, the past that would soon come hunting for her. But beside her rode a man who had caught her. And in ways she didn't yet understand, claimed her, and the desert, vast and wild, whispered its own promise, that nothing stolen stayed hidden forever. The storm chased them across the plains like a living beast, thunder rolling through the desert, lightning clawing at the sky. Talon's horse moved fast, hooves pounding through wet sand and flashes of light. Clara clung to him, her bound wrists pressed against his chest as the wind tore at her hair. Every crack of thunder sent a shiver down her spine, but Talon rode on as if the heavens themselves could not touch him. His body moved with the rhythm of the storm, unflinching, sure. When he finally slowed, they were miles from the canyon, the rain easing into a soft drizzle that glittered like silver threads against the dawn. He dismounted first and reached up to help her down. She hesitated, stubborn pride flickering in her eyes, but her body was too sore, her hands too stiff to resist. As his arms came around her, warmth spread through her even as she trembled. When her feet touched the ground, she pulled away quickly as though afraid the feeling might linger too long. "Why don't you untie me?" she asked sharply. "I've done nothing to you." Talon looked at her, that same steady, unreadable look. "You are still running," he said simply. "Until you stop, your hands stay bound." She glared at him. "You can't keep me like this." "I can," he said, his voice quiet, not cruel. "The desert is wide. You do not know it. If I free you, it will take you before I can find you again." "I don't need finding," she muttered. "I need freedom." He stepped closer, his gaze dark and deep as the night sky. "Freedom is not running," he said. "It is standing where you are not afraid." The words disarmed her, not by force, but by truth. She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Talon turned from her, building a small fire beneath a rocky overhang. The flame crackled softly, casting amber light across his skin. Clara sat apart from him, hugging her knees, watching the sparks dance upward. She didn't understand this man. Not his calm, not his control, not his silence. He could have treated her like a prisoner, a trespasser. Yet he spoke to her as though she were something more, someone whose spirit he recognized. Still, she couldn't let her guard down. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she asked suddenly. He didn't look up from the fire. "Because the land brought you here," he said, "and it never brings without reason." "That sounds like superstition." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe. Or maybe your people have forgotten how to listen to the wind," Clara huffed. "The wind doesn't talk." Talon's gaze lifted then, locking with hers. "No," he said softly, "but it whispers truth if you are quiet enough." For a moment, the air between them felt thick, charged with something unnamed. Clara looked away first, unsettled by how his calm gaze made her pulse race. When the fire died down, he rose and gestured toward the horse. "We ride again. My people are north. You will rest there." "I don't need charity," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You need a place to stop running," he replied. "That is not charity. It is choice." His words lingered long after they rode out again. Hours passed beneath a pale blue sky streaked with clouds. The land changed, the red cliffs giving way to stretches of tall grass and sagebrush, dotted with the bones of old trees. Clara's exhaustion dulled her anger. She began to notice things she hadn't before. The scent of rain in the wind, the way Talon's horse responded to the slightest touch of his hand, the quiet strength in the man himself. When they paused at a stream to rest, she dared to speak again. "You said you've heard my father's name." Talon nodded, washing dust from his hands. "He has traded with our enemies, sold rifles where peace should live." Clara swallowed. "I didn't know. Maybe not. But his name carries weight here. Not a good one." She stared down at the water, her reflection trembling with every ripple. The truth struck hard, her father's sins reaching farther than she'd ever imagined. Talon's voice broke her thoughts. "You are not him," he said. "Remember that." When she looked up, he was watching her again. Not judging, just seeing. The weight in her chest eased for the first time in days. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky in fire and rose, they rode together in silence. The distance between them no longer felt hostile. It felt like something unspoken, waiting to be named. The horizon stretched endless before them, but Clara's thoughts stayed close, on the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his back against her bound hands, the strange safety she felt in the company of the man who had once captured her. And though she didn't yet admit it aloud, a quiet truth stirred inside her. She no longer feared being caught. She feared what it meant to belong. By the time the sun began its slow descent, the world around Clara had changed. The jagged cliff softened into a wide valley, and smoke curled faintly into the sky from somewhere ahead. Talon guided the horse toward it, his posture relaxed but alert, like a wolf returning to its den. Clara's pulse quickened. "Where are you taking me?" He didn't answer at first. Then quietly he said, "Home." The word struck her strangely. She hadn't heard it spoken with warmth in a long time. As they rode closer, she saw it. An Apache village nestled against the red hills, framed by cottonwood trees and the shimmer of a shallow creek. Dozens of domed brush shelters stood in circles, smoke rising from their fires. Children ran barefoot through the dust. Women ground maize and tended small fires. Men watched her approach with silent, steady eyes. Every head turned when Talon rode in with a white woman bound to his horse. Clara stiffened, shame and fear twisting in her chest. The murmurs that rippled through the camp were sharp and low. She couldn't understand their words, but she understood their tone. Talon slowed the horse near a tall elder, a man whose hair was silver but whose stance was straight as stone. His gaze swept over Clara, unreadable, before resting on Talon. "She trespassed in the canyon," Talon said, his tone even. "I brought her here." The elder's eyes narrowed. "For judgment?" Talon shook his head. "For shelter." The murmurs grew louder. Clara could feel the weight of every stare pressing into her skin. Her throat tightened. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the dust beneath her feet. The elder stepped closer, his eyes sharp as flint. "You bring trouble, Talon. The white ones bring only sorrow." "She is not her people," Talon replied firmly. "She carries their gold but not their heart." The elder studied Clara as if searching for truth beyond her face. Then finally he nodded once. "Then she will stay," he said. "But under your word, her life is yours to answer for." Clara blinked, unsure if she understood. Her life, his to answer for. Talon bowed slightly in respect. "So it will be." The elder turned and walked away. The villagers dispersed, though their eyes lingered. A few women whispered to each other, glancing from Clara to Talon with curious looks, some pitying, others distrustful. Talon dismounted and untied her wrists at last. The rawhide left faint red marks on her skin. Clara rubbed them slowly, relief mixing with confusion. "What does that mean?" she asked. "My life, yours to answer for." He met her gaze. "It means if you harm anyone here, your blood is on my hands. If anyone harms you, theirs is on mine." She stared at him, stunned. "You took responsibility for me?" "Yes." He said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. "Why would you do that?" Talon looked past her toward the setting sun. "Because the land chose to cross our paths. I do not question its will." Before she could argue, a soft voice interrupted. A woman approached, graceful, her hair braided with beads, her eyes bright with kindness. She smiled gently at Clara and spoke to Talon in Apache. He answered briefly, then turned back to Clara. "This is Nita," he said. "She will give you food and a place to rest." Clara hesitated, but Nita's warmth eased her fear. The woman touched Clara's hand lightly and gestured toward a small shelter near the creek. Inside, it was simple. A woven mat, a small fire pit, soft furs folded neatly in one corner. Clara sank down, exhausted. Nita offered her a bowl of stew, corn, beans, and herbs that smelled richer than anything Clara had eaten in weeks. She ate quietly, her thoughts spinning. Outside, she could hear faint laughter, the murmur of voices, the crackle of fires. Life here was quiet but alive. Nothing like the cold, angry world she'd left behind. When Nita left, Clara sat by the door flap, watching the moon rise. The camp glowed softly beneath its light. Talon stood a short distance away, speaking with a group of warriors. Even in the dim firelight, he seemed carved from something fierce and old. When he turned his head, his eyes found hers across the distance. For a long moment, neither looked away. She should have felt like a captive, yet somehow she didn't. There was safety here, not comfort. Not belonging, but something steadier, a fragile peace. And as the night deepened, Clara realized something she hadn't expected. The desert had stopped feeling like a prison. It felt dangerously almost like home. Days passed in a blur of sunlight, smoke, and silence. Clara Weston woke each morning to the sound of the creek outside her shelter and the soft hum of village life. The Apache camp was alive in ways her father's ranch had never been. Laughter mingling with the crackle of fires, the rhythm of drums echoing through the evenings. Yet peace did not sit easily in her heart. Every glance, every whispered word reminded her that she didn't belong. Some women turned away when she passed. Others looked on with a wary kind of curiosity, as if unsure what Talon's claim meant. Children followed her with wide, fascinated eyes, whispering Tasaba, pale one. Talon kept his distance. He brought her food sometimes or spoke a few words in that calm, deep voice that seemed to belong to the earth itself. But mostly he watched, silent, unreadable, while she tried to make sense of the life she'd been thrust into. By the fourth day, her patience cracked. She found him near the horses, repairing a broken saddle strap. His back was turned, his long, dark hair falling over his shoulders. The sun caught the edge of his skin, turning bronze to fire. "You can stop pretending I belong here," she said, her voice hard. He didn't look up. "I never said you did." "Then why keep me here? Why claim me like some trophy?" That made him glance at her. The weight of his stare was sharp but not angry. "You think I claim trophies?" "I don't know what you think," she snapped. "One moment you act like my jailer, the next like," she faltered, "like I'm something you have to protect. I didn't ask for either." He rose slowly, the movement fluid and deliberate. "No," he said. "You asked for freedom, but freedom has a price." Clara folded her arms, chin high. "And you think you're the one to decide what I owe?" Talon stepped closer until the scent of smoke and cedar filled her senses. His voice dropped low. "You owe no man," he said, "but you owe yourself truth." The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. She turned away. "The truth is I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "That is not truth. That is fear." Something inside her snapped. "Don't you dare talk to me about fear," she said, whirling to face him. "You don't know what it's like to live under a man like my father, to be told what to be, who to marry, how to breathe. You don't know what it's like to have everything taken from you." Her voice broke at the end, the fury shaking her like wind through glass. Talon didn't move. He let her anger burn, let it consume the silence between them until her breath came in ragged gasps. Then he spoke, softly, almost gently. "You think you are the only one who has been taken?" She froze. He stepped closer, and for the first time she saw something raw flicker in his eyes. Not pride, not control, but grief. "When I was 12, he said, soldiers came to our camp. They burned our homes, took my sister. I hunted them for 2 moons before I found her body. You speak of loss, but loss speaks my language too." Clara's anger faltered, replaced by something that felt dangerously like understanding. He looked at her a long time. "You are not weak because you broke," he said. "Only those who feel deeply break at all." The words hollowed her out and filled her at once. She wanted to look away, but his gaze held her there, steady, unwavering. For a long moment, the wind was the only sound between them. Then Talon lifted his hand, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and said, "You fight because you still have fire. Do not let that fire burn you." Clara's breath caught. The touch was brief, barely more than a whisper, but it left her heart racing. She stepped back, shaking her head. "You think you understand me. You don't. Maybe not," he said softly. "But I see you." Something in the way he said it, quiet, sure, undid the last of her anger. She turned away before he could see her eyes glisten. That night, lying alone in the small shelter, she replayed his words until the stars faded. She told herself she still hated him for binding her, for deciding her fate, but her heart no longer believed it. Because when Talon had looked at her, she hadn't felt like a prisoner. She had felt seen, and that, more than the desert or the danger, terrified her the most. The wind came first, a low, restless moan through the canyons, stirring dust and whispers alike. By dusk, the Apache camp was bathed in bruised light, the horizon smeared with clouds that looked heavy enough to break the world in two. Clara stood by the creek, watching the sky darken. Her reflection rippled with every gust, her thoughts as restless as the storm. For days she had avoided Talon, burying herself in the quiet tasks Nita gave her, fetching water, gathering wood, learning how to grind maize between 2 stones. She found comfort in the work's rhythm, but her mind refused to stay still. Every time she looked toward the ridge where Talon trained with the other warriors, her chest tightened. She didn't understand what he had awakened in her, a blend of anger, admiration, and a yearning she didn't dare name. By the time the first drops of rain fell, Most of the village had retreated indoors. Only Clara lingered outside, her hair whipped loose by the wind. She didn't notice Talon approaching until his shadow fell beside hers. "You should be inside," he said, his voice steady despite the rising wind. She turned sharply. "I'm not made of glass." "No," he said, his mouth curving slightly. "Glass shatters quietly." She frowned, unsure whether he was teasing or warning her. Lightning cracked across the sky, painting his face in flashes of white and shadow. He reached for her arm, guiding her toward the shelter. She pulled free. "I don't need saving," she said. "Not saving," he replied. "Shelter." There is a difference, but she stood her ground, rain stinging her cheeks. "You think you know everything, who I am, what I need." "You don't." Talon's gaze softened. "Then tell me," the words caught her off guard. "What?" "Tell me what you run from." Her throat tightened. "I told you before, my father." "There is more," he said quietly. "Your eyes speak when your tongue will not." The storm gathered strength. Thunder rolled across the sky as though the earth itself demanded truth. Clara's defiance wavered. Her hands trembled at her sides. "He wasn't just cruel," she said finally, her voice breaking. "He was a tyrant. I watched him ruin people, take their land, their cattle, their lives, all for greed. And when I tried to stop him, he said I was just a woman, that my voice meant nothing." Her tears mingled with the rain. "I thought if I took what he valued most and his gold and then ran, maybe I'd be free. But I'm not. I'm still his daughter. I can't wash that away." Talon stepped closer. The rain poured harder now, soaking them both. "You cannot choose where you were born," he said. "Only who you become after." "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple. It is survival." Lightning tore through the clouds again, illuminating his face, fierce, calm, sincere. Clara shook her head. "And what about you? You talk about survival like it's sacred, but you're no freer than I am. You carry your people's pain like a chain." He didn't deny it. "Yes," he said, "because pain remembers what pride forgets." For a long moment neither spoke. The storm raged around them, thunder rolling like the sound of old ghosts. Then Talon reached out, slowly, giving her time to refuse, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm despite the rain. "Clara Weston," he said, his voice low, steady, and heartbreakingly gentle. "You are not your father's sins. You are your own storm. You have already broken free." Her breath caught. His eyes burned into hers, dark and endless. She wanted to pull away, but she couldn't. The distance between them vanished. For one suspended heartbeat, the world narrowed to the feel of his hands, the rhythm of the rain, the steady thrum of life between them. "Talon," she whispered, her voice trembling. He released her, stepping back as though the air itself warned him. "The storm passes," he said quietly. "When it does, you will see clear again." But Clara's heart refused to calm. As he walked away, she sank to her knees, her palms pressed to the wet earth. For the first time since she'd fled her father's house, she cried. Not out of fear, but release. The rain washed through her hair, her tears, her guilt. And somewhere in the distance, through the roar of thunder, she thought she heard his voice again, soft, carried on the wind. "You cannot run from what the land has chosen." When she lifted her gaze, lightning split the horizon, and in that flash, she knew the truth he spoke of. Freedom wasn't in escape. It was in facing what chased her. The rain stopped at dawn, leaving the land glistening and raw. Mist rose from the valley, soft and silver, curling through the Apache camp like ghostly fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke, the scent of a world cleansed yet waiting. Clara woke with her heart still heavy. The storm outside had passed, but the one within her hadn't. Every word Talon had spoken still echoed through her. "You are not your father's sins. You are your own storm." She wanted to believe him, but by midday her fragile calm shattered. Word spread quickly. A group of white men had been spotted near the ridge. Armed, mounted, searching. Clara's blood ran cold. She knew without being told who they were, her father's men. From a distance she watched as Talon and several warriors prepared to ride out. Their movements were sharp, efficient, silent. The moment he noticed her watching, he walked toward her. "You will stay here," he said, her stomach clenched. "No, if it's them, they're here for me." "That is why you stay," he replied evenly. "I won't hide while others fight because of me." She snapped, stepping closer. "You can't order me to." His hand shot out, catching her wrist. Not hard, but firm. I can, he said quietly. Because if they find you, they will not take you. They will kill you, and I will not allow that. Clara's pulse thudded beneath his fingers. For a moment she saw not a captor, not even a protector, but a man who carried the weight of every life under his care. Then, as quickly as he had caught her, he released her. Stay with Nita, he said. If I do not return by nightfall, you run. She watched him ride away, his figure cutting through the morning mist like a shadow made of resolve. The warriors followed, silent and fierce, their presence swallowed by the mountains. Hours passed. The sun rose and fell across the sky, dragging her nerves with it. Nita tried to calm her, but Clara couldn't sit still. She paced the edge of camp, her fists clenched. When the first distant gunshot cracked through the stillness, she froze. Then came another, and another. Her decision came without thought. She grabbed a small knife from the cooking fire, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and ran. The mountain air bit at her lungs as she climbed, the world narrowing to the sound of her boots pounding the earth and the far-off echo of rifles. When she reached the ridge, the sight below tore the breath from her chest. The Apache warriors had met her father's men in a clearing by the riverbed. Horses screamed, smoke rose, and the world was chaos. Clara spotted Talon near the center, fighting like a force of nature and swift, unrelenting. Every movement precise, and then she saw him, her father's foreman, Harsun raising his rifle, aiming straight at Talon's back. Before she could think, she screamed, "Talon!" He turned just as the shot rang out. The bullet grazed his arm, spinning him sideways. Without hesitation, Clara ran down the slope, her knife clutched tight, rain-soaked skirts tangling around her legs. Gage turned toward her, surprise flashing across his face. "Well, if it ain't the runaway," he sneered. "Your daddy's been worried sick." Clara's chest heaved. "You don't speak his name to me." "Oh, I'll do more than speak it, girl," he said, stepping closer. "He paid good money to have you back, and he don't care what shape you're in when he gets you." He reached for her, but before he could touch her, Talon was there. He slammed into Gage with the fury of the storm itself, knocking the rifle away. The two men struggled in the mud, fists and fury colliding until Talon's blade found its mark. Gage fell still. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Clara was at Talon's side, blood and rain streaking his skin. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice ragged. "You shouldn't have been alone," she whispered back. Their eyes met, his dark, burning, hers trembling, defiant. The distance between them dissolved in the heat of everything unsaid. Behind them, the last of the gunfire faded. The Apache had driven the intruders off. The battle was over. But for Clara and Talon, the real war, the one between fear and feeling, was only just beginning. He brushed a trembling hand down her cheek, his touch both fierce and reverent. "You are the only kind of madness I cannot fight," he murmured. And though she wanted to deny it, to claim it was the danger or the relief speaking, she knew the truth. Some storms weren't meant to be survived. They were meant to change you forever. The battle left the valley heavy with silence. Smoke drifted through the trees, curling upward like the spirits of the fallen. The creek ran red in streaks, and the air reeked of gunpowder and wet earth. Clara stood beside Talon, her breath still uneven, her body shaking with the memory of every gunshot. She could hardly believe it was over. Her father's men had fled, leaving behind their wounded, their pride, and the truth she'd been running from. She had brought this fight here. She had led danger into a world that didn't deserve it. Talon's wound had been bound tightly with a strip of cloth, but his movements were slower, heavier. As the surviving warriors gathered their dead, his eyes found hers through the haze. "You defied me," he said quietly. Her chin lifted, but guilt flickered behind her resolve. "I couldn't stay behind. You could have been killed. So could you." Their words clashed in the air like sparks, neither willing to yield. Finally, he exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. "You are brave," he said. "Foolish, but brave," her heart twisted. "If I hadn't come, Gage would have killed you." Talon looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. "Maybe that is true," he said softly. "But bravery is not always about saving lives. Sometimes it is about knowing when to let go." They returned to the camp at dusk. The tribe was quiet, mourning their losses. Some looked at Clara with gratitude, others with unease. She was the cause of both pain and victory, a living contradiction. Nita met her with tears and a fierce embrace. You ran into battle for one of us, she said. Now maybe they will stop seeing you as his prisoner. But Clara didn't feel free. That night, as fires burned low, she sat outside her shelter, staring into the embers. The rain had washed the sky clean, revealing an ocean of stars. The world felt vast, and suddenly so did her heart. She didn't hear Talon approach until he spoke. You will not sleep tonight. She didn't turn. No, too much blood for dreams. He sat beside her, wincing slightly as his wound pulled. They were silent for a long time, the fire crackling softly between them. At last, she said, Your people paid for my mistakes. Talon's gaze remained fixed on the flames. War always asks for payment. It does not care who gives it. I can't stay here, she whispered. If my father's men found this place once, they'll come again. They'll burn it to the ground. You think running will stop them? No, she admitted, but maybe I can draw them away. End it before more lives are lost. Talon turned to her, his expression unreadable. You would go back to that man? She swallowed hard. If that's what it takes. He stared at her for a long time, the firelight flickering across the sharp planes of his face. And what would you become, Clara Weston? The dutiful daughter again? The one who bows to a man who calls you his property? Her throat tightened. I don't know. Maybe I'll be the woman who stops running. His voice softened. You already are. The words hit her like a blow. Not in pain, but in truth. Then, slowly, he reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. If you go, I will not stop you, he said. But know this, you do not walk back into that world alone. Her breath caught. You'd come with me? If the fight follows you, it follows me. That is the way of my blood. Something deep inside her broke open, fear, gratitude, longing, all tangled together. And if it doesn't? She asked softly. If peace finally comes? Talon's hand lingered near her face, the distance between them thin as air. Then I will go back to my people, he said. And you? He hesitated. You must choose where your heart belongs. The words hung between them, heavy, inevitable. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, the world disappeared. No fathers, no battles, no boundaries between them. Only the quiet, steady pulse of two souls caught between two worlds. Talon, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know where I belong anymore. His fingers brushed her wrist, a fleeting touch that burned through her like sunlight. Then stay until you do, he murmured. She wanted to answer, but no words came. Only the feeling that if she spoke, the fragile balance between them would shatter. So she sat beside him in silence, watching the fire die down, knowing that when dawn came, everything would change. Because soon, she would have to choose between the blood she was born to and the fire she had found. And no matter what she chose, one truth would never fade from her heart. The Apache warrior who had whispered, "You're mine now," had not taken her freedom. He had taught her what it truly meant. The dawn came quietly, soft gold spilling over the hills, washing the camp in gentle light. The smoke of last night's fires drifted upward like prayers. Somewhere in the distance, a mourning drum beat slowly, a heartbeat for the fallen. Clara woke before the others. She stood at the edge of camp where the land stretched wide and wild, endless desert meeting a horizon she might never reach. The wind was cool, the air sharp with the scent of sage. Her decision weighed heavy in her chest. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's men retreating, saw the faces of the Apache who had died defending her, saw Talon's eyes in the firelight, steady, unyielding, yet full of something she hadn't wanted to name. She could not stay here, but she could not go back either. The world she came from and the one she had found stood on opposite sides of her heart, and she was the fragile bridge between them. A quiet sound broke her thoughts. Footsteps, familiar and measured. Talon. He stopped a few feet away, watching her as if he already knew what she was thinking. His left arm was still bound, his movements careful, but his presence carried that same quiet power she had come to depend on. "You will leave," he said softly, not as a question but as a truth already known. Clara turned to face him. "If I don't, my father will send more men. This land will bleed again because of me." He studied her for a long moment. "And what of you?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "When the wind changes and the world forgets your name, who will you be then?" Her breath caught. She looked away toward the sunrise. I don't know, she whispered. But I need to find out. He nodded once, though the muscle in his jaw tightened. Then I will take you to the edge of the valley. Beyond that, your path is your own. They rode in silence. The land stretched wide, bathed in early light, each hoofbeat a quiet goodbye. Clara tried to memorize everything. The scent of the pines, the distant cry of a hawk, the rhythm of Talon's breathing beside her. When they reached the ridge, the wind caught her hair and lifted it like a banner. She stopped, dismounted, and turned to him. This is where we part, isn't it? She said softly. He nodded. Your people's world lies beyond those hills, and yours? He gestured to the vast sweep of land behind him. Here, where the sun burns true. They stood there for a long moment, neither able to speak. Then Talon reached into the pouch at his side and drew something out. A small carved talisman of bone and turquoise shaped like a hawk in flight. It belonged to my sister, he said quietly. When you wear it, the spirits know your heart speaks truth. Clara's throat tightened as she took it. I can't accept this. You can, he said. Because truth is what you carry now. The weight of the small charm in her palm felt far heavier than it looked. She wanted to thank him, to tell him everything she couldn't say. How he had changed her. How she would never see the world the same again, but her voice refused to come. So she did the only thing she could. She stepped closer, reaching up to touch the side of his face. For the first time, he didn't pull away. Talon, she whispered, her voice trembling. You said once I was yours. His gaze held hers, steady and dark as the earth. You were, he said. And you still are, not to my hands, but to the wind. Wherever it carries you, it will carry my name too. The words broke something open inside her. Before she could think, she leaned forward and kissed him. Not gently, not fearfully, but with the fierce certainty of a woman who had finally found herself. When they parted, tears burned her eyes. Go, he said softly, before you change your mind. She turned away, mounted her horse, and began down the slope. She didn't look back, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew if she did, she might never leave. Only when the valley was nearly out of sight did she stop. The hawk talisman glinted in the sunlight against her chest. Behind her, far away, the wind rose, carrying a faint, familiar whisper through the canyon. You're mine now. She smiled, not as a captive, not as a runaway, but as a woman reborn. Because for the first time in her life, those words didn't bind her, they set her free.